Hi, I'm Hrund, Gunnsteinsdóttir, and I am about to have a productive conversation with my body.
Hrund, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to learn more about. And I'm gonna try to say it again. InnSæi, right? InnSæi.
Perfect,
All
perfect.
right.
You're more
Um,
or less an Icelander now.
the book is called InnSæi: Heal, Revive, and Reset with the Icelandic Art of Intuition. And I have to say, when the your work came across my desk, I'm like, okay, this is something I want to dive into. So the book answers this question out of the gate, but for somebody that first off isn't familiar with what InnSæi is, can you explain it in for someone who's just never really looked at it or thought of it, and why you've embraced it?
Thank you. That's a great question. InnSæi is the Icelandic word for intuition. If you look up InnSæi in the dictionary, in the Icelandic dictionary, you will get more or less the same definition as you get when you look up intuition in the English dictionary. After I had hit a wall, crashed, after I was forced to connect within in order to heal back to the life and the world I wanted to belong to, and after having, done my own practices and tried to connect with intuition, after having conversed with people all over the world and dived into a lot of research because I'm a curious nerd, so I would read a lot on intuition and mostly in English. The stuff and the conversation I had were largely in English, but also Icelandic, but to a very big extent in English. I realized that we have many different ways of defining intuition. I also realized that we all have intuition and it's very fundamental to our intelligence and ways of navigating and showing up in the world. But we have different ways of defining it. And I just, having kind of unearthed many different definitions and context, I just went back to my home yard, my home country, my mother language, Icelandic. And I looked at the Icelandic word for intuition again, and it just became alive. Before my eyes, it was like I was seeing it for the first time. And so I've used this word as a concept
Mhm.
in the sense that I look at how the word is put together. And here's an important context for the listener. So in Iceland, we have Icelandic. There is little less than 400,000 people in the world who speak Icelandic.
Right.
We are very protective over our language. It's very similar to Old Norse. It has hardly changed that much. We can literally read Old Norse still today because Icelandic hasn't changed that much.
Okay.
So before I go into describing more the concept InnSæi, I want to say that when we take in new words into our language, we don't just adopt the words and give them an Icelandic accent or something, or, a tone. We look at what the word wants to describe, its function, practice, whatever it is. And then we find a word that fits into our mentality and language. So InnSæi is made up of two words, in and sæi. In means inside or into, and sæi means to see or the sea. And I just
Interesting.
thought, wow, there's so much wisdom in that after having learned all the stuff I've learned about intuition. So here's my answer to your question.
Sure.
So InnSæi, the way I've used it, and we did in the film we made a few years ago, the meaning is threefold. First of all, it means the sea within. So it refers to this ever-flowing unconsciousness that we all have and intuition taps into. It's a way for us to describe how does intuition get developed? Where does it come from? How is it formed? It's the world beyond, words. It's a world of imagination and connecting unexpected dots. And it works way faster than our conscious mind. And if we put the sea within into boxes or silos, it ceases to flow.
Right.
And that's a very important function of intuition. The second meaning of InnSæi is to see within, and that refers to our ability to see inside ourselves, um, to be self-aware, to self-reflect, to be able to discern good intuition from biases, fears, or wishful thinking, and to be able to put ourselves into other people's shoes. All important parts of learning to hone our intuition. And then thirdly and lastly, InnSæi means to see from the inside out. And that has to do with our ability to navigate the ocean of life and professionally with a strong inner compass.
As you were talking about this, I was thinking about the idea of the world moving at such a pace and asking for quantity over quality. Like there is this imbalance there. And you talk about like the rhythms and the strong inner compass. How might someone apply this intuitive model when they are living in a structured world, that asks for a certain type of productivity or management of time, in terms of modern work? Like, how does someone kind of step back, gain that perspective, and then bring it to something that may not necessarily, it may seem counterintuitive, or for some, it might even feel like, well, wait a minute, this is counterproductive. I'm listening to that, I'm tapping into my intuition, which for some people might say, well, I don't get to do what I feel like doing, or I don't get to listen to my gut in this instance. I have to, I have to have action. I have to keep moving things forward. So how does someone apply this in a world that, is asking for quantifiable results, especially around modern work?
So this is a great question. So first of all, intuition is a big part of our ability to quantify the world, to organize ourselves, to reason and analyze. So I just want to say that at the start. Secondly, you're spot on. Our culture, societies are not organized for us to flourish and align with our intuition. We're just running to save ourselves, and we are running to deliver all the deadlines that we have. So really depending on the person, the individual, the personality type, the type of work, the structure of life, outside work, and so on and so forth. So this varies a lot between people. The very first step to do is to become aware, self-aware. Like, ask yourself, like, if this is very new to you as a listener, like, really ask yourself, do I have intuition? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? That's the first step ever. We can all do that no matter how busy we are. But having said that, if we are like super stressed and anxious, what happens then is that actually blocks our intuition. Things that can block our intuition also are lack of self-confidence. And what I mean by that is when we begin to doubt repeatedly our own experiences and feelings about things, what happens gradually, and this is like super subtle, what happens gradually is that we start to undermine our confidence in our own judgment. When we lose our confidence in our own judgment, this is when it becomes very hard to align with intuition and know in general what our intuition is telling us, as opposed to a fear, bias, or whatever.
There's an erosion of trust. Really?
There's an erosion of trust, yeah. And so part of my work is really about exploring this idea. Have we become biased against our own intelligence? Have we stopped trusting in our own judgment? Do we even know what a good judgment is for us and what intuition has to do with it? So just to add a few points to the people listening, in a very busy, overpressurized world, we all experience this, but there are always pockets of time and space and a regulated nervous system and a regulated brain for us to tap into an aligned intuition. For some people who are under a lot of pressure, literally going to the restrooms at work, taking 3 deep breaths that calm down our nervous system, just really being aware that as you stand on the floor in that room where you're not to be interrupted, you feel the soles of your feet on the floor. Neuroscientists sometimes advise us to yawn because that automatically taps into our parasympathetic nervous system to calm our system down.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I recommend, and I actually did this often myself, was like when I'm in meetings, actually, busy meetings, there's lots of talkings, there's a pressure to come up with something amazing and say something, that sounds sensible or wise or brilliant, whatever, or clever. Then just to kind of tap myself to think my name, like Hrund,
Mm-hmm.
hi Hrund, hi, just to come back home to me, to stay inside my own body. So for those listening, and for you, Mike, like, do you recognize the feeling of being always ahead of yourself? Do you recognize the feeling that you're chasing your mind and you're like, hello, where am I now? You have no idea where you're driving or what you're doing inside the building you're in because you're just stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And the thoughts are consuming you. We all have an ability to balance this state of mind with more of an intuitive alignment.
One of the things that this brings to mind is burnout, right?
Yes.
Because that feeling behind, the brain being in one place and the body and and for the InnSæi actually, if you're disconnecting from it, if you're drifting too far from it, you describe that burnout as drifting too far away from it. How do we? I think you've alluded to some things that we can do to kind of recenter and recalibrate, but realignment, like if we're already there, and there are some people who, they don't recognize overwhelm, or overwhelm just seems to be their constant state.
Yeah.
And then, and so therefore they're in it, they can't see it. And then by the time they see it, it's too late and they're burned out. And more people have been there than I would care to admit. I've been there. How do you realign yourself in those instances where the step back may need to be prolonged, or how do you realign yourself either before you hit that wall, which you've alluded to a bit, or once you're there? Like once you're there, how do you kind of pull back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, you need to want to pull back. That's a state of mind you need to reach that place where you think like, okay, I want to try something different. You need to be a little bit at least open to it. So there are quite a lot of things that I recommend for people in my book. And one of the things that comes to mind now is mind the inflow to improve the outflow on the one hand, and journaling is another thing. And I'm assuming that people are aware of techniques coming from mindfulness and meditation. And giving space for reflection and not to be overthinking things and stuff like that. We can go more into that later if we want to. But I mentioned improve the inflow to improve the outflow. That has to do with, intuition is an embodied intelligence. It's not an intelligence that we store just above the eyebrows in that part of the brain,
Yeah, it's visceral.
It's an embodied intelligence. We collect sensory data, information with our whole body through our senses 24/7, millions of data points. So when we are totally disconnected from our body and we think about our body like a transport for our brains between meetings or something similar, then we really need to get more in contact with our own bodies. And a way to approach this is to become more aware of what is the information and sensory data that I'm taking in throughout the day. So this is where journaling comes in. So let's combine the two together. Every day, make a point out of journaling and write down, first of all, in a stream of consciousness. So you write down whatever comes to me. You can do it in the morning. That's a prime time to do it. You can also do it in the evening. You can do it for 2 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever you have. Just try it out. Take a small step to begin with. So allow your mind just to flow on a piece of paper. If you don't know what to write, then just write, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And then what will come on your page are like thoughts just swirling. They don't make any sense. It's not yours to judge. Just let it out on the paper. What you're doing is that you're clearing up some space in your mind. You are realizing what it is you're thinking. So we have thousands of thoughts every waking hour of the day. And we are mostly unaware of these thoughts. They are no less shaping us to some extent. So you see the stuff that you're feeling your mind with, you can see it in the journaling as you write down on a piece of paper. You start to see recurring thoughts. You start to hear identify voices in your journaling that sometimes they belong to you, but sometimes they don't. So this could be like a teacher from the past, or a colleague, or a boss, or a family member, or a spouse. And that voice can either be constructive for you or very undermining for you. So
Right.
think about how you feel about that voice. Why is it popping up? Do you want to continue having it, providing it space in your mind, or do you not? Another way to improve the inflow of what comes into you into your being. So again, intuition is an embodied intelligence. It's not just what you see and hear logically. It's also what you pick up in the cafeteria, on the bus, all these different things, and also on the media. So I think news, media, and social media and scrolling are really hands-on examples, right? I can see you nodding. So these are we all know this. So be eccentric about what you allow into your space, because intuition is developed over time. It can change over time too. Most of the information we pick up are unconscious. They no less shape how we show up and think and perceive the world. So the more that we become aware of what we are picking up with all our senses and brain and body, the more we are able to improve the outflow of what comes out of us, how it is to be in our presence, if we think creatively or not, if we are optimistic or pessimistic, and all these different things. So intuition thrives on alignment. When we are aligned with all of us, like the whole body and the mind, it needs that in order for us to access it. But, intuition is very peculiar. Like it doesn't shout at us if we ignore it, It's always there. It's absolutely up to us to tap into it.
To me, it feels like the other thing that journaling does, which is helpful to intuition and InnSæi in particular, is patterns. You get to see things because, to your point, it's quiet, it's in the background, it doesn't shout. But if you put things in front of you, it will help you not only see patterns, but what to do with them, I would imagine. Can we explore that a little bit?
Yeah, we can do that. But tell me, what do you mean by patterns?
So when I journal, I have different ways of journaling. It depends, right? I mean, again, to your point, some days journaling is just a quick 2-minute dictation. Here's what happened. Like it could be very much just a chronology of the day. There's what happened. Others are more, there's definitely more of a feeling behind them. So, for example, as we're recording this, yesterday was my book launch party for the productivity diet. So that journal entry was definitely, thank you. It was very full. It was full of joy. It was full of, there was a lot of great experiences about it. And there was other things that I wrote about. And that would be another example of chronology, but it's expanded. But others, I will occasionally, because I journal every day, and I do it in the evening because I'm a night owl. So it kind of like sets my tone, not just to close out the day, but start the next day. But I will say, didn't get this done, didn't do this. What's going on here? So when I see patterns, the story that keeps being shared through my journal entries, when I go back and read them, that's when I see the patterns. Like, oh, Mike, you aren't spending enough time writing on this stuff because you've literally beat yourself up on this entry and on this entry and on this entry, and they're weeks or days or even months apart. And so that's where, though, to me, that intuition kind of says, you probably got to do something about this. Like it'll see it and go, and by the way, look at the date that this happened, because it's not just anecdotal evidence. there's empirical evidence too, because the word count isn't as high. Or, hey, Mike, this seems to happen every Tuesday that you're doing this more. Maybe you should just give yourself a break on Tuesday, right? So it doesn't just see the patterns, but to me, it helps me know what to do with said patterns. It offers
Yes.
clues, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for sharing that and to explain that. That's like super helpful. So yes, definitely patterns. And like you, I just want to pick up on that point on Tuesdays. Like, why does this happen on Tuesdays? Whatever it is in our days, the days we go through. And I also want to encourage people to journal about their dreams. We have like speculations about what dreams are. But in general, what I'm hinting at here is that sometimes I feel like we speak to ourselves in our dreams.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of like there's a lot of writing on this. And I have this experience myself. Sometimes I'm always missing a bus or a train or an airplane, or I show up in the wrong clothes or whatever. There's something that I'm postponing in doing or I should be doing, but I've been kind of putting it aside, stuff like that. So include your dreams. And when we recognize patterns, there is also like recurring ideas that we have. There are certain days when, on some days, we see things in a darker light. We tend to be more grumpy. We notice things that are on the downside of life, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that was a horrible comment, or that was a really ugly roof on that house, or something that's kind of, you see the darker side of life. Then when you look back on your journal, you also notice like, oh, actually, the night before I didn't sleep well,
Yep.
or I didn't manage to have breakfast. There are small things like that. And then you learn to understand that for some people, it matters what they eat during the day, like
Mm-hmm.
how their energy levels are and how they show up and how they experience the world around them. So that particular case sounds like, why is that so important? But I just said it can affect how they experience the world around them. And it reminds us that how we experience it comes to such a big extent to how we feel on the inside. And just that is part of the self-awareness.
Yeah, and I mean, noticing is the first step in that too. Like like you mentioned the ugly roof on the house or whatever. Like
Yeah.
when I go
Yeah.
for walking, is by the way, getting out is one of the best ways for me to do this, because um I am absorbing things, but not in a way that's focused. It's the outer level of attention, which is, to
Yeah.
me, intention and attention are the roots of being productive. And I mean, one of the things that I loved when I was going through the book, you know, um, you talk about this in the chapter 4, and we've jumped all over the place. We typically do this when we have a conversation because it's very organic. So
No, it's fun. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
within, you
Love
say,
it.
our impressions inform our insight. Otherwise, market forces will hijack our attention and distort our perceptions. And so, attention, we focus so much on trying to manage things that won't be managed. Time cannot be
Yes.
managed because time moves
Yeah.
on whether we want it to or not.
Yes.
We say, oh well, productivity is the goal. Well, the problem with productivity in a lot of cases is it's centered around the amount of things you make as opposed to the quality of the things you make. So, and we often don't have necessarily agency over that. But the things that we it's weird, the things that we avoid leaning into, and yet I would think that InnSæi kind of says, pokes you on the shoulder, goes, hey, this is something, like, stop trying to manage the time. What about managing your attention? Because attention
Yes.
is the space where things live. And that's the thing I think that, people lose sight of. So how do you suggest we protect our attention? Not just manage it, obviously, but protect it. So that way it doesn't get hijacked, and it, kind of, we can navigate our way through a world that really is filled with not just distractions, but ultimately things that become diversions.
Yeah. I love this question. So the first thing I would say is, so it's like attention is the key to our intuition. So it's like a spotlight that we put on the world. It's like we can look in the corner there, or we could look in the center, or we can, so it's really important to,
Or we
when
can
it comes
scroll
to,
on, social media.
exactly, and to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, and it just sedates us. So attention is super important. And so I mentioned earlier about the inflow, like protect the inflow, like be the steward of your own attention. Because if you become more of a steward of your own attention, as opposed to being a trash bin for anything that's thrown your way, so to speak, that totally shifts the way you feel. It shifts your energy levels. It shifts your sense of agency, and so on and so forth. So I would definitely say that. And then there's this, because you mentioned productivity. So part of my professional life is to be a leadership coach. And we witness when people lose their sense of agency, when people lose their sense of will, that's a very serious situation to be in. And sometimes we're not really aware of it because we are just on autopilot, But one of the ways to also gain ownership of our attention is to remember, it's not a good place to be in when, for example, you are at work. And let's think about an hour at work. You're focusing on answering, I don't know, a number of emails. There's a product you want to put in development, whatever, there's an assignment. But you keep looking at your phone. And like, let's say 2 to 6 times during that hour, and somebody who is a colleague comes and asks you something, what your mental state equals is that of somebody who is basically just smoking marijuana. It's like it slows down your brain power, according to this MIT research that I cite in my book. It's just very interesting to think about it that way, because it's super important to be eccentric about the attention and the pockets of time that we give it to. So, for example, instead of that hour being with your attention all over the place, we're not that good at multitasking as we think we are. So we need to be doing one, maximum 2 things in 1 hour, like at the same time. And one thing is the best. And so I recommend in the book and elsewhere is for people to set aside like 20 minutes for this task. Put the timer on. And after that, you can stand up and get a coffee or talk to that colleague who's been trying to get your attention. Or put aside an hour or put aside 2 hours or whatever time you have to train yourself to do this, and journal about how you feel about it. Because we might do this for a day, like, okay, I'm going to set the timer on half an hour and finish this, or 3 hours or whatever the task needs, and finish something before I go to do something else. I'm not going to answer my phone until after I've finished this. And then there's always this layer that I emphasize, and journal about it. Because we are very likely to feel in the moment, oh, this was good. I don't feel as torn and tired, but we'll forget about it the day after because we didn't journal about it.
Well, not only that, but you made a very clear word choice there, moment as opposed to minute. So what's like you're using time, the framework of time, which is in minutes. And journaling isn't about the minutes, it's about the moments. And you are, I mean, when I journal, there are things that show up that are mundane, but I would otherwise forget. And those, by the way, those mundane things can actually help you later when you go back to look at them, like, oh, right, this thing wasn't as big a deal. Or, oh my God, I forgot that this is the day that my daughter took her driver's test. And so, because we try to we use our brains. I've said this before. Your mind was meant to be a factory, not a warehouse, right? And to me, it the things that you talk about in your book that I kept coming back to were, I don't like to use the term soft skills. It's kind of gone away, but the words, like you mentioned, will, right? Instead of willpower. There's a very strong distinction between will and willpower, right?
Yes.
That people get lost up. They're like, I don't have the willpower. I'm like, but do you have the will? Well, yes, I do. I'm like, well, then that's how you get willpower is you have to tap into the will first before you can construct anything from it. And the other things that you allude to, and we've alluded to throughout this whole conversation, are things like grace, like giving ourselves grace. And before we wrap up, I want to make sure I ask this question because I have worked on film sets. I've been involved with making films before. A film production isn't exactly a place where the speed slows down. There are timelines. There are a dynamic element, not just within what's going on in production, but the people themselves. are very, I mean, they all have their own roles and responsibilities. So when you're making a documentary around the kind of work you're doing around InnSæi, and then you're like, okay, like, how do you navigate that? How do you embody that inside of that environment when, often can be a real pressure cooker? How did you do that?
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's a great question. So just to clarify, I don't have the honor of being the film producer
Sure.
of the documentary film, but the director and the storyteller and the script writer. So that's like I'm very much engaged in editing and stuff like that. So it's so true. It's like, so that's an example of work you do. Like in my case, I did this because I was passionate about it. It was really aligned with my purpose and curiosity, and I was learning so much, and I was on my toes, and often went into a state of flow and also in the creative process. But then sometimes it's like just yawning, and do we have to wait another 5 hours for this to happen? And all these different things. And I guess what what I did there is just to really hone in on what we are talking about when we're talking about how do you hone and harness your intuition? How can you be as present as possible in these different moments during these strenuous hours where you're really exhausted and tired and you just want to go to sleep, and sometimes you're so tired you just want to throw yourself on the floor and cry like a child. But then I remind myself, it's like, why am I here? Take a deep breath, practice grounding. And what I mean by that in a circus, like when you're in a very busy environment, just put your focus on the soles of your feet and take a deep breath. Just focus there and just be in the moment and let go of control and see what comes to you. And even if you do this for 5 minutes, it's such a relaxing state of mind to be in. And it's totally underestimated because when we are present, that is when we can hone in on our best knowledge, expertise, experience, and intuition. When we are not present in the moment, it's harder for us to use our intelligence more holistically.
But it's harder to connect the dots too.
Yeah.
I can tell you that the reason I'm able to, and I mean, this is not a toot your own horn moment, but I mean, through the podcast, like I have my focus modes on where nothing gets through, and I have
Yeah.
my questions that I have in mind, but they are more of a guideline than a absolute, because there will be nuances, and the only way that I can navigate that is by being fully present. Because if you were to say something and you can tell when someone's not paying attention. Like if
Absolutely.
you can tell. And
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why, even though we may not use video for every episode, and we often don't, at least at this stage of the game, I have the camera on so that the attention is there. Like, yes, I'm
Right.
looking at my notes. You are sharing your experience. This stuff, as somebody who's written a book about it. Like so, but there's an energy that gets conveyed too. That
Yes.
reflection has its own energy, and presence has its own energy, and planning has its own. Like they all have different
Yes.
vibes. And
Yeah.
as we were talking about this today, Hrund, I couldn't help but think about when you think about letting go of control, which you said.
Mhm. Mhm.
We live in a world that loves to, quote, harness, control, at the very most, when it comes to InnSæi, to me, I'm looking at it going, you can't control your intuition. Yeah, I mean, to me, I don't think you can. The closest you maybe can get is commanding its attention, like bringing it forth. That to me
Mhm.
seems about the only, because of all, like, as much as we have agency over our attention and all that stuff, it's, to your point, which we touched on earlier, insight is forged by experience, by the passage of time as we're making our way through it, and space. So it's not something, it's like legacy, I guess, in a way. You can't control what your legacy is going to look like. You can help try to shape it to a degree, but every single person that you come across is not going to say the same thing about you when you're no longer here, or even while you are here. And to me, am I on the right track when we're talking?
No, that's like fascinating. So tell me what you mean by control your intuition. Do you mean you control the content of an intuition?
Yeah, that's just a lot of people try to, the idea of, okay, this is what, okay, so let me give you an example with attention, right? You can say, so when I talk about time theming, right? Like, okay, a monthly theme. My monthly theme for the month of, this is being released, we'll just say my monthly theme for August. I have 2 monthly themes. Personal is adventure. Professional is auditing. So my attention, I can harness it and can command it to look at that. Oh, wait, I wake up, it's September or August 1st. What's my overarching focus? Oh, it's adventure. Okay, well, what are all of the tasks that are associated with adventure so I can give those intentions my attention, right? So you can do that. But intuition, you can't. I don't think you can say, all right, intuition, do this. Like the most you can do is, when I say command it, is you can bring it forth, right? You can go, here, take the wheel for a while, right? But you have to be willing to let go of the other things that are trying to take the wheel. And you have to also be willing, well, like you talk about the sea metaphor in here. The sea, like 1 degree difference on the water and you're in a completely different, you have to not only be willing to let it, to let it take the wheel, but you have to be willing to let it get you to the destination that it's trying to get you to, and trust in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that. That's brilliant. So yes, so trust is super important. Understanding what is a well-honed intuition as opposed to fears, biases, wishful thinking are also super important. And knowing when you can rely on your intuition and when you can't.
Right.
So these are super important things. So there's the more I've worked in this area, the more I think like actually it requires a level of critical thinking to have a well-honed and harnessed intuition. But like you say, it is about trusting your intuition. It is about just letting go of deliberation and being receptive.
Yeah.
And so in the last chapter of the book, I talk about the 2 rhythms, learn to hone and harness the 2 rhythms, which I present like modern day navigation tool, because the world we live in is just so turbulent and complex. It's like the ocean, right? So, you need to keep your head up so you don't drown. And then you need to decide what's your direction in this life and in this world. So it's all about whether we look at Nobel laureates, geniuses at school, mental agility, people who have amazing resilience, people who achieve things or live a good life, people who like the life they lead. They have somehow learned to find the balance between the 2 rhythms, which are the rhythm of being and doing, being deliberate and receptive, analytical and intuitive, rational and creative, looking at the micro, looking
divergent,
at the macro.
like all of these
Exactly.
things. Yeah, the yin and yang.
All of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, finding the right balance between these. So the reason why I say this in this context is that what I found to be very important to remind us of is that it's not always an either or, intuitive or analytical. It's about how these merge together. And because you alone can be the expert in your intuition, therefore it's so important that you journal so that you understand how your intuition is. And that you also understand that it's shaped over time, developed over time, which means that you need to do the work to align with it. You can't just take a week, all right, I'm going to align with my intuition and that's that. It doesn't work that way because it's how you navigate that really matters. So trusting in intuition, knowing when to trust it, when to let go of processes as opposed to being at the steering wheel, deliberating, planning is super important. And to be able to, we have this expression, why don't you just sleep on it? It's like an old wisdom, like you need to make a big decision or something. Why don't you just sleep on it? You're tired now. There's a reason why we've said this for probably centuries. And it's because our unconscious mind needs to get the space, needs to get away from our rational, chatty, logical mind, just to process and brew and see what is the right thing to come to the surface for us the day after what it is. And that's what science supports as well. So in my book as well, I really try to honor the different schools of thoughts that we have in our history, in the now, most recent scientific discoveries, and compare them with ancient wisdom and timeless wisdom that we have to find, seeds of wisdom across different disciplines and cultures and stuff like that, and see just how when we weave these together, compare and honor them equally, then quite a solid perception of what intuition emerges.
Well, I can tell you right now, as we're wrapping up this interview, I've had a very full day up to this point, and my intuition is telling me that once we're done, I'm supposed to I was going to do something. I'm like, no, you need to take a break and you're going to take a rest. I'm going to listen to that.
Well done.
And I hope that people enjoyed listening to our conversation today. The book is called InnSæi, Heal, Revive, and Reset with the Icelandic Art of Intuition. Hrund, where can people pick up the book and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Thank you. So the book is you can find the book on HarperCollins, the publisher's website. There you get links to all the different booksellers, but in general, you can find it online and in all major bookstores in the US and Canada. My work on intuition is also presented on my website. It's my full name.com, Gunnsteinsdóttir.com. I'm not even going to ask people to try to remember this.
It'll be linked in the show notes.
It'll be linked in the show notes. And if you Google Icelandic intuition, my name will probably come up. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram. And please, join us on this journey. It's a beautiful journey of discovery and remembering and finding our place in the world again, and just finding ways to co-create the future that we all want to see.
Well, thank you, Hrund, for taking some time today to have a productive conversation with me.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on your show. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks to Hrund for joining me on the program. You may have noticed off the top, I did not do a typical intro because pronouncing Hrund's name was going to be a challenge. So I'm glad that we had her do that off the top. But more importantly, I'm really glad that we had this conversation. You can check out all of the relevant links, show notes. You can watch the film. You can check out related episodes, either in the show notes that you're checking out on the app that you're using, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, even YouTube, Overcast, whatever you use to listen to podcasts, or just go to mikevardy.com/podcast 615. You can find everything there as well. While you're listening to this episode, if you happen to be listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, subscribe to the show in case you haven't already done so. That way you don't miss a single episode of what's to come, which includes next week's episode where it's going to be an Ask Me Anything. There's still time to actually submit questions. And so I've got the live stream is going to stream on YouTube. So if you want to check that out when it goes live, you can ask questions live, be part of the show, or have a chance to be part of the show. Another thing you can do to support the show, other than to check out, the live stream and subscribe to the show, is to leave a comment. Whether you're checking out on Spotify or YouTube, you can leave a comment. Let me know what's working well for you with the podcast. Let me know what I could stand to improve upon. Ratings, reviews, that sort of thing, they help make the show better. So again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you got a lot out of it. I know I did. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.